Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mahalaya Marshall, and I'm with the IQ Consortium Secretariat. On behalf of the IQ Consortium, I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar entitled Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, BPCA, Overseeing a Pediatric Drug Development Program, the NIH way. This webinar is sponsored by the IQ Drug Product Leadership Group's Pediatric Working Group. Before we begin, I would like to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees will be on listen-only mode. The Q&A session will begin after the presentation, and questions may be submitted throughout the webinar. Depending on your viewing method, use either the question module located in the control panel or click the question mark at the top of your screen. If possible, please preface your question with the slide number. Second, this webinar will be recorded and the slides will be shared approximately 48 hours after the webinar concludes. Due to fluctuating local bandwidth demands, attendees may experience intermittent delays in slide transition and/or audio disruption. Click the handout icon to review the connection and audio tips for possible solutions. Finally, I'd like to thank you again for joining this webinar, and I'll now turn things over to today's moderator, Beth Galila. Beth?
Thank you, Mahalia. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am Beth Galila from Bristol Myers Squibb, and I'm a member of the IQ Pediatric Working Group, and I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. Dr. Perdita Taylor-Zapata is a physician with the Obstetric and Pediatric Pharmacology and Therapeutics branch at the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, where she leads the effort for implementation of the BPCA at the NICHD. She's a pediatrician from the Washington metropolitan area, and she graduated from Howard University Medical School in 1994. And completed her pediatric residency training at the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. After her residency, she worked at the National Institutes of Health Clinical Center as a clinical physician in the Pediatric HIV Working Group of the National Cancer Institute of the Outpatient and Inpatient Medical Needs. She spent 7 years there taking care of the outpatient and inpatient medical needs of the HIV-positive pediatric patients enrolled in phase 1 and 2 clinical treatment trials. In addition to her role as a staff physician, she was also involved in medical research, writing parts of clinical protocols, and conducting retrospective and prospective research projects. Dr. Perdita Taylor-Zapata is currently the primary program lead for the entire BPCA program, including the Pediatric Trials Network, the DCC, and the logistics contract team. In addition to pediatric drug development, she's also has research interests in pharmacoepidemiology, workforce diversity, and adverse effects of medications used in children. After today's webinar, you will receive an email from Mahalea with a survey. We really appreciate your feedback. And also, I'd like to mention that if anyone in the pediatric community has interest in presenting at this forum, please feel free to reach out to myself or David Tan. And I'm now happy to turn it over to Dr. Taylor-Zapata.
Thank you so much to Mahalia, to Beth, and the entire IQ Consortium. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today and for the invitation. Hopefully you can hear me okay and can see my slides. I am presenting to you today my confessions, as I call them, or my opinions about sort of building a pediatric drug development program at the NIH. I have no financial disclosures and will not be discussing any proprietary information. And just to share with you where I sit at the NIH, I'm a part of the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development that Beth mentioned earlier. And you see our mission there. Specifically, our goal in our branch is obstetric and pediatric pharmacology and therapeutics. And one of the programs that we oversee within our branch is the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act program at the NIH. And I'll give you a little bit more details about that. And just my goal today really is to talk about pediatric drug development overall how we are a part of it at the NIH and how I think we all can partner together to move pediatric drug development forward. So in general, as most of you know, pediatric drug development is a part of a bigger picture overall drug development. But specifically for pediatric drug development, it usually follows adult drug development primarily. It's usually driven by adult drug development. And that's important, and that's a great model because we want to make sure the drugs are safe and have proof of concept before we're giving them to our children. However, that can also become problematic when pediatric conditions are different from an adult condition. And this particular model of extrapolating from adults really becomes problematic when you get to the really smaller, younger children, particularly neonates, preterm neonates, and for children that have rare conditions, again, that do not occur in adults. So that in general can sometimes make pediatric drug development slow and patchy. And those are some of the things that we want to talk about today and how we hope to have addressed that. As most of you know, pediatric drug development has unique challenges. Research in children is not easy. A lot of considerations go into it, ethical considerations, medical considerations, and this slide here is a copy from a Pharma article that was done years ago. And it talked about a lot of the things that we talked about, particularly about children may even respond differently to medicines than adults, because remember, children are along a developmental spectrum, and the developmental impact of medications and the impact that development may have on medications is a unique challenge for children. And with those unique challenges, you then see that drug development tools can become missing, where you can have delays in the availability of data to support usage and a lot of off-label use in pediatrics. Pharmacology, particularly pharmacodynamics, how the drug impacts the body and how the body impacts the drug is usually an afterthought in pediatrics. And that can lead to market failures. And we've seen many articles published in hypertension and other therapeutic areas where if you don't have the right dose, you're not going to get the right effect. And that can also lead to uncertainty and safety as well. And then in general, the scientific advances in pediatrics can be delayed as well. So the boundary that we work under generally is pediatric labeling. And as you know, BPCA is a legislative mandate that gives pharmaceutical companies 6 months of exclusivity to conduct pediatric trials. And this model started in 2002, actually, and was preceded by the 1997 FDAMA, FDA Modernization Act as well. But this incentive has provided at least over 700 labels since its implementation, label improvements in pediatric drug development. So it's definitely been a success. And it's primarily overseen by the FDA, where when there are old indications, you have patent status protection that's usually done by pharma. And also PREA, the Pediatric Research Equity Act. Also, if there's a new indication for a molecule, then PREA kicks in and pediatric studies can be done that way. But if there are no indications, no new indications, and there's no patent protection, that's where the NIH program comes in. There's a section in the BPCA legislation called 409I, and that gives NIH the authority to develop a pediatric drug development program to study off-patent drugs that generally do not have patent status. And those could be drugs that just came out of patent within the last 5 to 10 years, or they could be drugs that have been around for 50, 60 years that just still, after all these years, have limited data on safety, dosing, and efficacy. And those are some of the things that we have tackled in this program, and I'm going to share a little bit about that with you today. So again, this is just an overview of the legislation. Primarily, it's overseen by the FDA for the on-patent part of that, given the pediatric division oversight for that, and is really the responsibility of pharma and pharmaceutical companies to study drugs in pediatrics in the on-patent space. But if there is no patent status, we at the NIH have 4 primary roles that we play. First, we are instructed to prioritize the needs that currently remain in pediatric therapeutics. And we do that through an annual outreach that we've been doing since 2003 to various stakeholders across academia, industry, patient parent organizations, et cetera. And anyone who's interested in the program can also apply to give us information on what needs are there that remain in pediatric space. So we do that prioritization process annually. From that prioritization process, we then sponsor clinical trials. We fund clinical trials to be done for those prioritized areas. And then once those clinical trials are done, we submit that data to the FDA for a labeling change. Now, again, we don't own the label. The NDA holder still owns the label. Our data are submitted, reviewed by the FDA, and then the FDA negotiates with the NDA label holder to change that label. So it's a high hurdle for us to accomplish, but I'll show you some positive results that we've had over the years. We're also responsible for pharmacology training, improving the workforce, and we're also responsible for translational research to improve pediatric drug development as well. So again, this is just a schema of what we do: prioritize, sponsor trials, and then we're also responsible for disseminating that data, not just to the FDA, but also to the academic community, to the scientific community, through data sets and through publications that we make available. We're also responsible, as I said, for training program. We have a T32, which is an institutional grant training program that we've been running since 2012, that we believe has successfully improved the pharmacology workforce as well. But despite these areas that we're focusing on every year, there are sort of gaps that still remain, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I wanted to share with you the actual labels that we have changed over the years. And initially, when I did this slide, there were 15 label changes, but in the last couple of months, we had 2 additional ones. So now we officially have 17 label changes. The ones in sort of orange color are sort of prior to the Pediatric Trials Network, which is our current infrastructure to conduct clinical trials. And I'll talk about that in a minute. The other ones in sort of the blue colors are all sort of come out of the Pediatric Trials Network program that we are sponsor. So again, 17 label changes. You can see from the label changes, they range in areas. It could be in an ICU setting, like sodium nitroprusside. It could also be antibacterials or antivirals, as you see with acyclovir and ampicillin. It could be in an outpatient setting, like lithium in the psychiatry world. And it also can be a wide range from adolescents and the lithium to all the way to preterm neonates for caffeine and acyclovir and a lot of the labels that. So a wide range of therapeutic areas, a wide range of therapeutic settings that we have improved the labels in as well. So one of my first lessons when I talked about my confessions that I wanted to talk about for what we have learned over these last 18 years in running this pediatric drug development trial is that infrastructure matters, and really building a pediatric drug development program and learning how to do that well. In the initial years of the pediatric, the BPCA program, I'd say from 2004 to about 2010, our initial model was related to how we generally fund research at the NIH. We generally fund research either in an investigator-related initiated award, like an R01 it's called, or a network-based award like a U award, for example. Those are the funding mechanisms that we use at NIH to fund research. And so that's the model that we originally built from 2004 to 2010, was sort of funding this program like we usually do in an NIH model. So if you build a network of academic centers to address a particular drug, whether it's lithium or sodium nitroprusside, you build that infrastructure for that particular drug. And once that drug study is done, you tear that infrastructure down. And when it's time to do a new drug, you build a new infrastructure and then you tear that down. And what we realized over that period is that that became ultimately ineffective and not sustaining and not efficient to be able to give us longevity and productivity if we wanted to keep this program going long term. So in 2010, from the brainchild of our previous branch chief, Dr. Ann Zychek, we actually developed an infrastructure called the Pediatric Trials Network. And their goal was to be a management hub for the program, really to be able to manage the clinical sites and to bring the expertise all in one space to be able to develop the clinical trial. So you have the scientific acumen and infrastructure, and you also have the management infrastructure all in one to be able to do that. And that award was done in 2010 and again in 2017 and was given to the Duke Clinical Research Institute, who have done a magnificent job in being the management hub for the program. And I'll show you some results of that infrastructure. We also have a BPCA data coordinating center at the MS Corporation, and we also have a logistics team, the Infinity Conferences group, that support us as well. So that was one of the first recommendations I wanted to give about how to successfully build a pediatric drug development program, and that is really building a strong infrastructure with at least the two components that I mentioned before: the scientific acumen to be able to do these types of trials, and then the management as well. So again, this tells you about the Pediatric Trials Network. Our focus really is off-patent therapeutics. And these are our results thus far. 18 therapeutic areas covered, wide range, over 11,000 patients enrolled in our trials, and a large number of our trials are done either via a master protocol where you study multiple drugs under one umbrella, or an opportunistic model where you're doing primarily a PK study, evaluating the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of a drug, and you can study multiple drugs at one time under multiple settings and multiple patients. And so we've been very successful using those two models of enrolling patients. Thus far, we submitted 26 products to the FDA for labeling change. And as I said before, we initially had 15 label changes, but as of December and January, we now have 17 label changes, and we're very proud of that. So the programs brings to the table pharmacology expertise in modeling, simulation, assay development, and validation. Also innovative trial designs, as I talked about before, utilizing an opportunistic model for doing PK studies, collecting data from patients via standard of care. They are prescribed the drugs by their provider, and then we are collecting pharmacokinetic samples. And then the use of master protocols to study multiple drugs at a time, whether it's epidemiology, seizure drugs or anesthesia drugs. Using these master protocols really give us a strong way to be able to look at multiple drugs and multiple patients at a time. Of course, with our years of experience in our wide range of therapeutic areas I mentioned, we have a lot of experience and engagement with the FDA review divisions and multiple review divisions. Many networks have a specific disease focus, whether it's a heart or a lung or a kidney, but as you saw, our therapeutic range is wide. And so our experience with the FDA has been very wide as well. And we have the model I talked about, sort of that business model. We have learned to do trials more cost efficiently as well, where we use this opportunistic model to be a feasibility study, for example, to not just gather data on PK that we could take further to a safety or efficacy trial, but also to be an evaluation for how a site is able to conduct a trial. So it's actually a feasibility study for the site as well as for the science. And it allows us to really be able to be cost effective in how we approach our trials. At the same time, we're also promoting investigator training as well, and incorporating junior investigators into our trials as well early on, and giving them the experience to develop trials. One of the examples of the trials that we have had a label change in is the acyclovir. Acyclovir has been around for many 40, 50 years probably, but there was no neonatal dosing in the label. And so it was prioritized early on in the BPCA program, and then the Pediatric Trials Network took on that mantle and built a PK and safety trial in preterm and term neonates. And it creatively used PK data in addition to real-world data, epidemiology data from a pediatrics database, combined that information together, submitted that to the FDA, and actually that resulted in a label change to improve the dosing information based on gestational age for preterm and term neonates. And that one label change had an impact. You know, we changed dosing in the NeoFACS, which is a clinical dosing guide that neonates use. And also Health Canada updated their label based on the data that we provided as well. So great success. Another model that I want to share, an innovative trial design, was a trial that we've done in breast milk, actually collecting PK of medicines used during breastfeeding. That was awarded in 2017, and that's one of those examples of a master protocol I talked about, where you can look at multiple drugs at one time, and you can even look at mother-infant pairs at the same time. So we enrolled over 800 patients, studied 10 drugs. The cost was about $5 million, so a very cost-effective way to study a lot of patients with a focus on PK. And we actually just submitted our first drug to the FDA back in the winter of last year. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have a drug label in the next year or two for this particular molecule. So really the success of the program is really sort of that centralized infrastructure we have, over 100 active sites and exposure at least to over 200 sites in general, but active sites are about 100, many regulatory rigorous trials in 10 years, 9 label changes now since 2017. And again, the expertise that I mentioned before. And this stable infrastructure that I'm talking about actually serves as a platform for even other networks within the NIH as well. We've collaborated with the ECHO program, which is a pediatric program at the NIH, as well as the INCLUDE program, which is another program at the NICHD that studies Down syndrome patients. So because of our infrastructure, we were able to be a model for others to be able to do these types of trials as well. And then also having this infrastructure gave us the ability to be able to respond rapidly during the COVID pandemic as well. So I'll skip these slides and just want to say that we use pediatric extrapolation and different pharmacometric approaches because it really gives us the ability to do precise dosing of patients, to identify safe and effective doses without doing an efficacy trial first, gives us narrow dose range and a number of patients for trials, and ability to conduct more efficient and safer trials, and really to reduce the cost of trials as well. And again, I mentioned the opportunistic model that we use that really allows us to study many drugs within a single platform. And some of that data, we are able to have full pediatric extrapolation. If we have that data, we can just submit that data to FDA for label change and have been successful in drugs, as I said, like ampicillin in that way. But even if we don't have full pediatric extrapolation, we can do partial extrapolation and use that data to design safer trials and more efficient trials moving forward. And so we have used this model for at least 10 years and really started with sort of the low-hanging fruit approach, which has been great, but it really does get us so far. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And this is an example of the opportunistic study that I mentioned where we're able to enroll many, many patients and study many, many molecules cumulatively over time, gives us real world PK data, and also helps inform phase 2 and 3 trials as well. So one of the things that we've been thinking about with pediatric drug development, when I talk about this, building this infrastructure, is that also we have to think bigger as well. And is it time for a shift in pediatric drug development where the data that we have not only informs the development of new trials, but also are there other things we can do, like the collection of biomarkers or developing endpoints that could be used to inform the drug development process earlier. And so as the program matures, that's some of the things we're thinking about. What else can we do with this model? How can we do clinical trials better? And that's what we're working on now. Sort of what are our next steps in the program? So as we talked about building the infrastructure, then what we've learned, my second confession, is that we then have to reinvest in the infrastructure. And it's important that we look at the model that we have, reinvest in it, and look at it and see if it's still working for us and what else we need to do. Are we improving the workspace? Are we, incorporating new technologies into what we're doing? So as we mature, we're learning that there are new things that we need to do. We need to look at, more pharmacometrics modeling. And simulations data. We need to include more pharmacometrics, pharmacogenomics, data, more outcome measures and endpoints of disease and treatment responses, more novel designs, more innovative technology. These are the things we need to do moving forward in the next 5 years, the next 10 years. But these are not things we're going to do alone. One of the things with reinvesting in infrastructure is then you have to make sure that you have the resources to be able to do that. And one of the things that we've learned over the years is that because of the resources that we have, we can do a lot of great things. We can change labels, but we are limited in the amount of phase 3 trials we can do because of our resources currently. We're also limited in our follow-up and standard trials. And we have a flat budget that we've had for over 18 years. And what you were able to do in 2004 and 2010 is different than what you're able to do in 2022. So we've had to start to think creatively about, what is it that we can do with the current resources that we have. So one thing that we thought about was, even though we are changing labels, Are there other things we could do that doesn't require a lot of resources until we get more resources? What else can we do? So we started thinking about, even with label changes, there's things that still remain. What could we do to sort of address these issues of study designs and endpoints and team science approaches to pediatric drug development? And one thing we sat back and thought about is that, we've been doing this for over a decade. We can actually be a resource for others, who want to do regulatory rigorous trials. So one thing we did in the last year was we started looking at developing a resource guide of what's needed to improve the pipeline of science ideas and the conduct of pediatric drug development research, called Quality Pharmacology. So this is one of those sort of reinvestment tools that I'm talking about, sort of what we could do. So we actually said, let's become a resource ourselves and give some information about what people can do or where people can go to get information on how to do this type of research. And so that's what we did. We went forward with forging sort of new areas and talking about how we build a resource and then become a resource. And so I'll show you in a little while this framework initiative that we're working on as well. But our goal really is the same. We want to continue to do clinical trial research and clinical trials that can simultaneously be submitted to the FDA, but also taken up into routine clinical practice. So that's our next step as well. Becoming a resource, both in building a resource guide, but also then making sure that what we are putting out in these label changes are taken up into routine practice. So that's some of the things that we're thinking about as we reinvesting in the infrastructure. What are some of the things that we can do? I wanted to just take a really quick stop to say that, we've been in the middle of a pandemic for 2 years, and it's impacted all of our lives in all kinds of ways, but it also has impacted us as a network. And one of the things that we did early on in the pandemic was we took another inventory and said, what do we need to do? What needs to happen? Studies, sites, have to shut down because they are, dealing with patient care, and they're dealing with, disease, and dealing with taking care of patients and taking care of staff. So how can we contribute to the understanding of this pandemic? Are we okay? How can we support our sites as well? So again, this all went back to this sort of reinventing, reinvesting in the infrastructure. It was a forced reinvestment because of a pandemic, but an important reinvestment nonetheless. And so that's something we decided to do. And we sort of revamped one of our trials, our POPS trial, which is our opportunistic trial. And we just focused on COVID drugs. A lot of our trials, as you can see here, the numbers went down dramatically over the years. They finally started to pick up again in early 2021. But what we did was reinvested in this one opportunistic model and started looking at COVID drugs and seeing, what COVID drugs were given to children. And can we collect PK samples, play to our strength, which is pharmacokinetic studies. And we started collecting PK samples on patients who were giving COVID drugs. And we actually have a good number, over 100 patients who have received remdesivir, which is one of the COVID drugs. And our goal is to develop some concentration analysis that we will publish in the coming months, we hope, and that will sort of give information to the scientific community about a proper dosing and the use of some of these medicines in children. So that was one of the things that we did as well. So once we're sort of starting, fingers crossed, sort of to come out of the pandemic, we're now sort of moving from pivoting to really sustainable change. And what are some of the things that we can do? And so we learned a lot from the pandemic, including using electronic signature tools, IRB waivers, how to do that, IRB approvals for telephone scripts, and a lot of things electronically, even sort of how we monitored our sites more electronically and more remotely, we improved over the last couple of years. So a lot of things that we learned in the pandemic, we will take with us as well and continue moving forward. So again, that sort of reinvestment in our infrastructure as well. So what kept us really going is, I think what kept us all going, being flexible and staying in contact with each other. Communication saves relationships, even networks. And so staying strong in communications with each other and with our sites, and then keeping the mission at the forefront, which kept us sane and kept us committed and kept us all moving forward. So moving forward for the program, we talked about sort of reinventing in the infrastructure, And so I think now what we're talking about is what we do moving forward and where we're going. So one of the things we learned is we have to play to our strengths. Pharmacology is our strength. And we saw that even through the pandemic, how we can contribute with our expertise. And that's something we're going to keep moving forward. We also talked about having that strong infrastructure and really making sure that we are monitoring our metrics and moving forward with, the things that we do well and improving the things that need to improve. Things like site processes or contracting with sites or negotiating with the FDA, the things that used to take a long time. How can we improve upon those things? So those are the things that we're doing now and we're thinking about now. And then the one other lesson that we are working on now and learning is how to operate in a parallel universe. And our parallel universe is we still have a mandate to move forward with. We have resources that are available to us. And how do we keep going with this mandate with the current resource and the current environment that we have? So we're maintaining or managing the existing that we have. At the same time, we have to forge the new. So this requires creative thinking for how to do this, given limited resources. And so again, we're building platforms. We're building upon what we currently have. So we're going to build data platforms for the 10 years of data that we have. And we're going to start thinking creatively about how do we collaborate with people to do this. Yes, we have pediatric pharmacology expertise, and we have the infrastructure to be able to do this research, but we don't have the resources to do phase 3 or a large trial. But maybe what we could do is strategically partner with other networks and other stakeholders such as industry to do proof of concept studies that we could then pass on to others to continue the research that we started. Or for those even who have outcome measures or endpoints that need to be done and a pharmacology study needs to be done as a proof of concept, we can take that resource that has been available and build a team together where we can move the science forward. So this idea of strategic collaboration is important in this new model of how do we do things better with the current world that we're living in. And again, we build new programs where we can that require limited resources but are still important to the scientific world. And that's the BPCA framework initiative that I alluded to earlier, where we're building a web-based resource that we believe houses at least 120, maybe 150 articles, book chapters important for how to design clinical trials, how to include pharmacoepidemiology research in clinical research, how to do PK modeling and how do you do that well, and what pharmacodynamic biomarkers are important to move forwards, and the importance of formulations in pediatric trials. So all of the top areas and top resources that are available in these areas, we've pulled them together over the last year. And our hope is to have that web-based resource available in this next year to everyone. So again, this is an example of the resource that I mentioned before. And our goal was really to centralize and advertise to various stakeholders who do pediatric drug development, the large amount of good practice tools and resources that currently exist. And we've done that. And like I said, we have about 150 resources available. And hopefully our next step after that is we built the resource is for others to take it on and improve approaches to how drug development is done, and that it will lead to more of a team science approach to how we do research in general. So this is a snapshot of the resource. And again, it has what you should read first, what are helpful tools, and then what are additional tools that are available. And we're really proud of this research and this resource because there were some articles that we thought were very important, but were not in the public domain. And that was important for us that these articles be in the public domain. So we actually reached out to a couple of our publishers and said, we really want to be able to make this public and available to people. And we had at least 2 resources that were not previously publicly available. And we were able to talk to the publishers and they were able to make it publicly available to us. So we're very proud of that fact. And once we have more information of where this resource will be housed, we will certainly share that with any of you who are interested in having this research. So as we move forward, I think our goal, as I said, is to really continue to advance clinical trial designs. And I think the PTN, the Pediatric Trials Network, can become a network of networks and really expand the expertise that we have available. We'll continue in the program to fund translational research and basic science research. And our goal also is to expand training. We have a T32 program, but we think there are other training models that can be built as well. And we'd like to really do those in collaboration with industry, in collaboration with other academic centers, and in collaboration with others who do this. We also want to be in the forefront of improving the workforce, both the training of people in the field, but then also the inclusion of more people into the field as well, and improving diversity in the workforce. And of course, we want to also form strategic partnerships and do networking that's both tangible and long-term sustainable. So our goal really is to expand our clinical program with the components that we talked about, sort of building pipelines, improving our dissemination and uptake of clinical data, of the labels that we've done thus far, of course, continuing with our labels, but improving the uptake and tracking of that as well. And then I think our goal of the next 10 years really also is improving our community engagement and developing inclusion as a platform as part of our program as well. So we definitely think that these are some of the things that we'd like to do moving forward. Earlier career development, as we talked about before, inclusion and diversity, and then having a PTN, the Pediatric Trials Network, as a resource for both students all the way through postdoc, all the way through medical physicians, really being a resource for how to do pharmacology and pharmacometric studies very well. And I believe that, the opportunity in drug development is wide. And as I started, at the beginning, I talked about how, we built this infrastructure to be able to do pediatric drug development. But really the goal is for us to do clinical trials that improve pediatric labeling. And we've done that. And I think we have proven that we could do that. But now is the next step. How do we globally, as a community, improve drug development across the board, whether it's in basic science, whether it's in early research, whether it's in clinical trials, or whether it's even in the repository of data. And what's not included here, I think also, is the patient engagement as well. And so how do we do this in a team science approach? And I think we all would like to see that move forward. I think it's important that we all work together and sort of build this collaboration and build bridges towards how we could do this, taking the expertise that we have as an NIH program, marrying it with what happens in pharma, marrying it with what happens in academic centers that have R01s and other types of awards, and really working together to answer the big questions that still remain in pediatric development, whether it's endpoints, biomarkers, et cetera. And how do we do this well? So I think the opportunities for team science is still going, is still important, and it's something we can all do together. Thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to present. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask, and I'm certainly open to those. So thank you again.
Thank you very much for this extremely informative presentation. Sounds like you guys have a lot going on. So that's wonderful to hear. Okay, one question. Can you expand on some of or any connections or partnerships that between NIH and industry that you envision or hope for the future?
Absolutely. One of the things I didn't talk about too much in the program was, as the program was built, historically, we did not have a lot of engagement with industry. And that seemed, appropriate because we're dealing in an off-patent space. So, there is no real connection with industry. And I think that in the writing of the legislation, I think it was important that there is an off-patent space, but I don't think what happened naturally was sort of a development of a partnership with industry. And I think moving forward, since we have a proof of concept for that clinical trials can be done in the pediatric drug development space, even in off-patent space, I think the next thing is to build a bridge with our industry partners and find a common goal that we can all work together to improve pediatric drug development. So concept studies or studies that start as PK studies but then are expanded to include safety, efficacy, big data, artificial intelligence. Those types of things we can't do alone. We need to do in partnership. So I'd love to see NIH, industry, academia, for example, partner in a common goal, whether it's a biomarker in a particular disease or how to do pharmacodynamic biomarkers across multiple therapeutic areas. I think either of those could be strategic partnerships that could be built and really move the pediatric drug development process forward. So building bridges across common goals, but like I said, whether it's biomarkers or endpoints or et cetera. There are other areas too that we can build a common goal. For example, training the workforce and improving pharmacology training expertise. That's something that would benefit all stakeholders. So could there, for example, be a joint training program that includes, a person working in academia, working at FDA, working at NIH, and then working at industry, and then sort of getting a broad range curriculum, for example, of how to do pediatric drug development from the different aspects. I would love to see a cross-collaborative training program done that would improve the workforce. So, I mean, those are just small examples and things that I've thought of in my head, but I think common goal is the way to move forward. And if we have a common goal, we can overcome the challenges of, legalities and things of that nature that are important. But if we have a common goal, I think we can move forward.
All right, thank you. Any thoughts on how to facilitate the establishment of such relationships and connections?
Well, as usual, it starts with people of passion and purpose. I think, having that sort of common goal, like I said, I think finding something that would work for us. So let me use the example of training. I would love to learn sort of what training models currently exist within an industry corporation. For example, what models do you use for training your new investigators who come to industry? What collaboration does industry have with FDA already to be able to make sure that your new investigators know how to engage with the FDA? And then we could then come in and give our experience with sort of dealing with the FDA and working directly with the FDA to build new programs, to build new product development, to build programs for how to do a study, and even all the way to the submission of that study to the FDA. I mean, we have a long range of expertise, I think, that we could build. So that's just one example. I think sort of finding the right people, doing a data gathering or some sort of resource investigation, sort of what currently works, what models currently exist, what models currently work, and how do we build upon those? So knowing the right people to contact in the different stakeholders. That's one key thing I think that really would move the ball forward.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, another thank you for an informative talk. Do you see a role for development of age-appropriate formulations in your vision?
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a role in age-appropriate formulations. And a lot of the things, that's one of the areas that we have not had the resources to be able to really move the field forward. That's a very resource intensive area, but it's a very important area. Why are you doing a clinical trial without really the appropriate formulations? And there are a lot of hurdles to doing formulations research, but I think if we learn how to do it well, we could then use that model in other areas as well. So that model of how to develop an age-appropriate formulation, if we're able to do a model with academia and with small pharma companies and with big pharma companies using the expertise of all three, and build a model to be able to do this well, I think we can extrapolate that model to multiple areas, but we just need to have the resources to be able to really build a program that we will think will work for across multiple stakeholders. It's very important to do, it's resource intensive, but I think, again, back to my point, if we have a common goal to be able to do, I think we can make it work and move forward.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, a question on how will that the web-based resource be shared once it's ready to be rolled out? Do you know?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So right now, we have it on our hard drives as a PDF, but the goal really is to put it in multiple places so that multiple stakeholders can have access to it. So we're starting right now with what we control, and that's our BPCA website. That's bpca.nichd.nih.gov. It's a long name, but you just could how Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, and you can come up with our website. So our goal is to have that available on our website probably by the late spring, early summer. So I would say April or May. But I certainly will let you know. So that's the easiest path to put it on our website. We'll also have it available on the Pediatric Trials Network website, so pediatrictrials.org. Also, we'll have it available on that website by the summer. And then I've been talking to different stakeholders, the NIH Collaboratory, which primarily focuses on pragmatic trials. I've reached out to them. I've reached out to other stakeholders to see if they would be interested in housing this document. And we could be responsible for and we plan to be responsible for the annual curation of this, but we really want it on broad areas to be able to make it available. So if anyone on the call has any ideas or thoughts or would like to house it as a resource, please reach out to me and let me know. We'd be happy to do that. But our start would be to put it on our website and put it on our Trials Network website, and then continue to make it grow and continue to have it available for those who are interested in it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have right now. But I think maybe Mahalia can speak to what will be shared and how questions can be sent to you as well following the webinar. But again, Dr. Taylor Zapata, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us and in the area of pediatric medication development with NIH as well. So, really appreciate it. And I would like to turn it back over to Mahalia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Dr. Taylor Zapata. It was a really great presentation. I really appreciate your time spending with our consortium members and the public. So as Beth mentioned, we will be sharing the slides and a recording, a link of the recording of today's presentation. If there are any outstanding questions that you'd like to pose to Dr. Taylor Zapata, please send them directly to me and or Beth, and we will be very happy to forward them along. If you have any questions about how to be a speaker on IQ webinars for drug product and pediatrics, please contact Beth Galella. And as a reminder, we will have a very, very brief feedback survey. If you would be so kind as to respond to that survey, it really helps us continue to provide excellent content and relevant themes for our webinars. So with that, I'll go ahead and close out today's webinar. Thank you again to Dr. Taylor Zapata, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.